Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Chinese investments in the U.S. commercial real estate market soars 500%, while the Blackstone Group purchased 40,000 residential properties, making it the nation's largest landlord. The latest buzz, Bitcoin. What is it, and will it last? Maury, let's first touch on the Bitcoin, because we talked about this, I don't know, 8 or 9 months ago. It was in its infancy stage still. Was it $13 per Bitcoin? It's a virtual digital currency, which is still a little tough to get your arms around and to grasp. It went up to 1,200 2 weeks ago. It went down 50% after China said that it was illegal. What do you make of the Bitcoin craze, and what do you think of this? Is it a fad? Is it going to be here for a while?
It's a craze, but it's like the mafia had its own private way of passing money. To me, what it is. It's Sir Richard Branson, the great inventor.
Virgin Atlantic, Virgin this, Virgin that.
Yeah. I mean, he's one of the great innovators of our era. He thinks it's wonderful, and if you want to go to the moon or where he goes with his spaceship, you can pay for it with Bitcoin. It's another way of degrading and denuding our organized way of civilized living. That's the way I look at it. I really do. It's everybody now can have their own little way of compensating somebody. You don't have to go to a bank. You don't have to do this.
But isn't it similar to gold and silver?
But gold and silver has a universal and traditional history. I mean, that's it in a sense. Since
who's to say 300 years from now, Bitcoin doesn't have a history?
Yeah, but wait, it's like saying. But gold has earned its reputation by being thought of as tender, as existing and respected tender. Why did people that in times of stress and the Jews who were kicked out from one country to another, what would they take with them? They take gold or silver, paintings, things like that, that they could easily move with.
Well, that's interesting you bring up paintings, because what makes art valuable? I see a bunch of paint thrown onto a canvas and someone gets $10,000 for it. To me, it's worth nothing. So it's all dependent on what someone's willing to pay for it.
That's exactly right. And when we talk about Bitcoins, and you said, well, how, and I think you were doing this as a provocative question, as you tend to do, and that is, maybe so. Maybe 100 years from now, Bitcoins will be an everyday way of currency exchange. But right now, it's a sign of the weakness of our economic system.
The global economic system.
You go back, what the British pound, the sole reason why the British would not join the Eurozone, and they were smart, maybe it turned out they were smart, is because the British pound was still the most respected currency over the last 300 or 400 years. Then as America became the leading nation in the world, the dollar has been a great currency. The Germans were stupid. In 1999, Helmut Kohl, who had the feelings of guilt for what the Nazis, wasn't the Nazis, it was German. The Germans and Nazis are interchangeable. I'll stand behind that statement, and I am more qualified than anybody I know to say that 90% of the German people during the war were Nazis. They loved it when Hitler took over France and he took over all European countries, killed Jews and robbed them of their paintings and of their wealth and used it for himself. They were happy about it. You didn't find anybody in Germany during the winning part of Hitler's war. Until he got stuck in Russia, the German people were 90% behind him. And what's my point? My point is that the strength of the mark, which Germany maintained all through the aftermath of the Second War, would have kept the mark right up there. Instead, because of his rightful feeling of guilt about what the German people had done to many other people, especially the Jews, he felt that by joining the Eurozone, they would do something good for the poorer countries, the 28 that finally came along.
So do you think that the Bitcoin is a way for maybe less transparency in financial transactions, I'll put it?
You just you answered your own question. Of course, that's exactly what it is. I think it's a fad. I don't think it'll go anywhere. But let's say it does. It's a way of getting. The Iranians would be smart to develop a Bitcoin economy. If they did that, then they would say, you tell us anything you want to. We'll deal with China. We'll deal with Russia. We'll deal with India.
Who's to say it wasn't created by a government somewhere?
But the point, that's a conspiracy theory you can put into anything. But I think I don't like the idea of it. I don't like disorder. I'm a great disciplinarian. I believe in order to the nth degree, even if it means restraining some of the liberties that people have. Liberty to do whatever they want to destroy civilization. So the point is, no, I think this Bitcoin thing is a fad, and I think we ought to get
We'll be talking more about that in the months to come. Chinese commercial investments, commercial real estate, soaring 500% in the United States. They're looking at this country as a very vulnerable, big asset to be taken right now. And the Blackstone Group, which you know very well,
I know
has
very
just
well.
purchased 40,000 residential properties in 14 cities, becoming the country's biggest landlord. And now we've got, remember the real estate, the derivatives that they were selling?
The mortgage-backed derivatives.
Mortgage-backed securities. Now we have rental-backed securities. What do you make of that situation?
First of all, let's take the Chinese. The Chinese haven't been around 6,000 years for nothing. They are the great business minds of the world. When you go to the Far East, when you go to Vietnam, you go to Singapore, 75% Chinese, Malaysia,
Hong Kong.
the brains, all the brains, but I'm talking even countries which are not basically Chinese, they are the ones that bring the smarts, this is not a pleasant definition, but they call the Chinese the Jews of Asia, because the Jews have always been identified with being
and they
very
pride
smart.
themselves on education. Their children are the
true.
smartest kids in the
Well,
world.
and what do both have in common? They both have civilizations that go back thousands of years. You can argue that and say, well, somebody that's only been around 100 years can be no, they can't. It's this civilization and the traditions of civilization are evolutionary from one generation to another, and some people catch on, other people don't. The Chinese are smart. The Chinese have one thing going for them: they have a huge surplus, $4 trillion. The reason that they put a lot of that money into the American dollar, into the American treasuries, was to get some leverage.
And they're not buying them anymore, are they?
No, they're not buying. They'll probably start selling them because they. You know why the Chinese really bought our treasuries? Because they did not want America to be weak, because America was their biggest market. They realized if they weaken America, America will not be able to buy Chinese goods, or they wouldn't send.
So it's like the marriage that stays together for the children's sake.
That's probably a good allegory, no question about it. But also the Chinese have now built a navy. Their Navy now is bigger than ours. Our Navy is down to the level of where it was at the beginning of the first war. Remember Reagan said we should have a 600-ship Navy? We don't have a third of that today.
And I know there's a lot of folks that will say, well, who needs a Navy? What about the shipping routes? What about the trade routes?
But you just again answered your own question. Why are the Chinese investing? The Chinese realize America is the greatest nation on earth. They will make no bones about it. They would like to eventually be that way themselves, but they realize the way we're coming back, even with the abysmal type of government we have, we are still stretching our Gulliver muscles. So the point is, the Chinese say, wait a second, this is a country to invest in, not their paper, but their
assets.
Their assets, their tangible, hard assets. So the thing is, it's actually basically a sign of optimism for the future of the United States, that they are now investing into commercial and industrial as well as residential assets.
And they're buying a lot of property that have aquifers and reservoirs underneath them because they realize that their growing population is going to need water, and they're not the cleanest society on earth.
Well, water is something I have gotten deeply involved in, and I don't think we have time today. But
We don't.
But Israel and desalination is quite a story in itself. We'll save it for the next time. But when you mention the Blackstone Group,
We're becoming a part-time working nation and a rental nation, are we not?
Yes, and the Blackstone Group is smart. Everybody's so excited about the fact that new housing sales went up, or new housing basic applications went up 26%. Gee, this is 3/4 of that is rental and leasing. You know, Chicago, I happen to be lucky. I have some few investments in apartment buildings. You know, the return has tripled in the last couple of years. They don't have enough room for people that have left their homes. They call them empty nesters. You know, they came in from the suburbs, but they're not buying. You know, they are renting.
And so when you look at the new Wall Street game, shell game, the rental-backed securities, that's the exact same thing they did with the mortgage-backed securities 5 years ago.
The technique is exactly the same thing, except what they're recognizing that mortgages are no longer in. You know, the one thing people say, oh, gee, with those low-rate mortgages, they're up to 4.6 now, what they were as low as 3.4 or 5. Yeah, but you try to get a mortgage like that and not show an income statement that shows you're able to handle it, or you, instead of paying down 5%, you're paying down 25 or 30%. They don't tell you that. They just say, oh, and it's easy to get a mortgage. It's not easy to get a mortgage.
We only have a couple minutes left in this segment. I wanted to get to QE3 tapering, and I wanted to get to the budget deal. Let's start with the budget deal because that's more important. The Republicans, I think, are posturing for 2014 elections. That's probably why they're giving the Democrats everything that they want in this budget. You agree or not agree with the budget that was just passed by
I think
Ryan
it's the
and
only
Marty?
thing we could do, because it was a nothing budget, because basically you're talking about $63 billion over
10 years.
Yeah, it's nothing.
It doesn't even start till 2021
But the point
anyway.
is, what it did, it took away the leverage that the Democrats had
Of the government shutdown.
don't say anything more, of the government shutdown. That's exactly right. And they played right into the hands of the Democrats, who thought they were going to use that to crush.
So the Republicans are so scared, skittish, and shell-shocked that they would do anything to avoid a government shutdown because it's pinned on them.
But it was remarkable. You got the best financial brain in
Paul
the
Ryan.
Republican, Paul Ryan, and Patty Murray is you know, he's a sweet woman. I mean, she wouldn't hurt anybody. She's a very nice person. So the two of them got down, and this almost goes back to the days of Reagan and the Speaker of the House,
Tip O'Neill?
Tip O'Neill and Reagan. That's what Ryan and Patty Murray was.
But they didn't cut anything.
Yeah, but what they did is they got over a hump.
So they put off the disaster that would have been a government shutdown.
Or they couldn't afford another government. We'd have gotten creamed in the November election, in the coming November election. Absolutely. I think this is the best thing that's happened to the Republicans in the last 2 months is to have this know-nothing type of deal that they cut between the Senate and the House, and the fact that Obamacare is self-destructing.
Okay, really quick. We only have a minute left. The Federal Reserve has just decided to cut back a little bit, $10 billion a month, from its quantitative easing. Does that mean that they're going to take more off the table in the future, or is this just a little bit of a stopgap for a while?
No, I think it's just a sign. It's a sign that's saying that they're not married to indefinitely to quantitative easing. There comes a point where they have to worry about the fact they've taken into their balance sheet
$4 trillion.
No, you're right. It's over $4 trillion. They started off with $1 trillion. So they are the biggest single buyer of government bonds. So they're saying We're not going to disturb it too much right now because we're just sort of getting our feet on the ground. But we'll do it if it's necessary. We'll cut it even more. And if we see that there is a real problem, where we're sinking back into an economic abyss, they'll go plus. If they see things are going well, from their standpoint, the great thing about the Federal Reserve Board, it's independent. If they ever allowed the Congress get their grubby hands on their business, I think the central bank would be gone forever.
So many more things I wanted to talk about, but
I know.
the clock
We don't
doesn't
have the
stop.
time.
We need to take a quick break. Our global outlook, political insider, and history segments are straight ahead. If you'd like to email us with comments or catch a segment that you missed, just log on to our website, theworldreport.org. And while you're there, remember to like us or recommend us. We'll be right back.